What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. As I look back over the last 9 years, I have been honored to lead or participate in the burial of a number of members of what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation, including my own 98-year-old grandmother. This is the generation that survived the Great Depression, won World War II, and built modern-day America. I have listened to the stories from the patriarchs and matriarchs of this generation and reflected on my memories of my grandma, Mary Walker. Here are some words describing our loved ones from this era: faith, strength, hard work, sacrifice, perseverance. But one additional word especially speaks to me: optimism. There's a hopeful attitude and outlook that permeates the greatest generation. They voiced the belief that even in the midst of hard times and difficult struggles, life will get better, and we will be a part of making it so. That is also the hallmark of the Christian faith. In our gospel reading, we just heard from John, Jesus is described as coming into the world to be the light of all people. He is the light that overcomes all darkness. And his light is not limited to his birth in a manger 2,000 years ago. Later in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "Abide in me as I abide in you." Christ is present within and illuminates each of us. His light inside us gives us hope about our lives and a spirit of optimism about our future. Knowing that Jesus is present within us changes the way we look at everything. A number of years ago, I was introduced to a different way of looking at our families, businesses, communities, churches, and the world around us. It is a concept called appreciative inquiry. Rather than focusing on the problems or the deficits or what we're lacking, it directs us instead to look and listen for the positive abundance and the creative possibilities within us and around us. This approach is much like the incarnation of Christ. It is seeking the birth of a light within that overcomes all darkness. It begins with these questions: what works and gives light and life to this system? And how do we build on those life-giving properties? And then these questions invite us into deeper questions. What brought us together in the first place? Why are we still together? And what is the animating, life-giving force at the very core of our being? What I discover at the core of members of the greatest generation is a deep and abiding faith in God. They believe and they know that God cares about and is personally engaged in human history. They believe and they know that God is present in their lives and in the lives of their families. And this belief and this knowledge mean that they have a responsibility to be positive change agents in the world. The light of Christ within is not an abstract principle to this generation. It is a real and animating force within their lives. They do not look for someone else to change things or for someone else to blame for not changing things. They look within themselves, find Christ there, and do everything they can to shine his light in the world. This was not just true of helping each other survive the Depression or of defending humanity from the atrocities of cruel regimes. It is true right up until their final days on earth. The story of my grandmother may be very similar to your story or the stories that I've heard from you about family members of the greatest generation. I remember Grandma showing me pictures of her playing basketball as a girl. Then she would take me out to the basketball goal and show me how she perfected her granny shot. Even in her later years, she still had it. Grandma worked hard most of her life as a seamstress in her sister's dress shop and as a partner with her husband in running a farm in Little Forkville, Mississippi. In 1966, a terrible storm known as the Candlestick Park tornado cut a huge path through central Mississippi, killing a number of people along the way. It destroyed my grandmother's and grandfather's home and farm, and my aunt was in the house along with them. All three were seriously injured. But with the help of neighbors, especially with the help of friends and parishioners of Bethlehem Baptist Church, they rebuilt their home, their farm, and their lives. Later, Grandma faced a challenge that was in many ways more difficult than the tornado. In her later years, my grandfather was in very poor health. He lost a leg, and he had serious mobility and other challenges. My grandmother became his caregiver for many, many years. She worked day in and day out as his nurse. I remember her telling me that she took a 5-minute break toward the end of each day. During that time, she would sit down, treat herself to a miniature Snickers bar, say a prayer of thanksgiving for making it through this day, and say a prayer of hope for tomorrow to be a better day. It was her example of lifelong love of and of service to God, and her taking time to share Bible stories to me when I was a child that had a profound influence on my later call to be a priest. I'll never forget sending her an invitation to my ordination as an Episcopal priest. She was 92 at the time. She was in poor health, and I knew that she couldn't make it, but I thought she would enjoy having the invitation as a little keepsake for her memory book. But Grandma, as she often did, surprised me. She called me and said she had bought an airline ticket from Mississippi to Kansas to fly for the ordination. I said, Grandma, I'm flattered, but you don't fly. Are you up to making this trip? Grandma, a dyed-in-the-wool Southern Baptist, responded, it doesn't matter if I'm up to it or not. I've got to be there. I've got to make sure you're being ordained in a biblically based church. After the service, I remember Grandma cornering the bishop during the reception in her wheelchair and quizzing him about the beliefs and practices of the Episcopal Church. Across the room, my face was turning redder than it usually is. I wondered if I was going to be the first priest ordained and defrocked on the same day. I saw the bishop later and apologized for my grandmother, and he looked at me and said, Paul, never apologize for her. Talking with your grandma is the most fun I've had at one of these things in years. I remember her asking me to send copies of my sermons to her. She wrote back to give me constructive criticism, but also to tell me how much they encouraged her. Well, her letters encouraged me and gave me the confidence to find my voice. During her funeral 3 years ago, we celebrated Grandma's deep faith and optimism by singing her favorite hymn. The words of the refrain are this: there's within my heart a melody. Jesus whispers sweet and low. Fear not, I am with thee. Peace be still in all of life's ebb and flow. Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, fills my every longing, keeps me singing as I go. Not only did we leave the funeral humming that hymn, we left with renewed hope and optimism that Grandma had handed down to us, and that you and your loved ones from the greatest generation have handed down to your families. As we enter this new calendar year of 2018, we do so looking inside the core of our very beings and seeing the light of Christ there. May we find that light inside ourselves and inside each other, and appreciate the good that dwells within each of us. May this light overcome all darkness and fill us with Christ's undaunted spirit of hope and of optimism. Happy New Year. Amen.